The observation chamber of the Nexus Collective's primary research facility curved like the inside of a massive pearl, its opalescent walls shifting with patterns of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Dr. Sarah Chen's heartbeat. She hung suspended in a containment field, her lab coat replaced by the standard gray prisoner garment that did little to ward off the chamber's clinical chill. Three beings stood before her, their bodies wrapped in flowing robes embedded with crystalline structures that sparkled under the chamber's ethereal lighting. The arbiters of the Nexus Collective, as they called themselves, had been questioning her for what felt like days. "Your resistance is pointless, Dr. Chen." The central figure spoke, its voice resonating directly in her mind. "The quantum consciousness theory you've developed threatens the very fabric of our society. We must understand it. We must contain it." Sarah managed a weak smile despite the neural probes sending waves of agony through her body. "Science isn't meant to be contained," she rasped. "Knowledge belongs to everyone." The arbiter to her left moved closer, its crystalline appendages extending toward her head. "Then you leave us no choice. We will extract the knowledge directly." The pain began as a whisper, then built to a scream. Sarah felt her consciousness being pulled apart, examined, catalogued. They were methodical in their brutality, these beings who had appointed themselves the guardians of galactic knowledge. Through the haze of agony, she could see them processing the information they were stealing from her mind, their crystalline structures pulsing with each new revelation. "Impossible," one of them whispered. "The human consciousness isn't merely housed in their neural network. It's quantum entangled across multiple dimensions." Sarah knew she was dying. She could feel her body shutting down cell by cell. But something else was happening too. The quantum fields she had studied, the ones that had gotten her into this mess, they were responding to her consciousness in ways she had only theorized about. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was the alarmed voice of an arbiter. Her patterns, they're not dissipating. They're reorganizing. 43 minutes later, Sarah Chen opened her eyes. The observation chamber had erupted into chaos. Alarms blared as dozens of researchers and security personnel scrambled to make sense of what they were witnessing. Sarah stood in the center of the containment field, her body whole, her mind sharper than ever. "Fascinating, isn't it?" she said, her voice steady and clear. "Consciousness doesn't just observe quantum phenomena. It shapes them." The arbiters backed away as Sarah stepped forward, the containment field crackling and failing around her. Her body glowed with a subtle blue light, quantum patterns dancing across her skin like northern lights. "You wanted to understand my research." She flexed her fingers, watching as reality seemed to ripple around them. "Let me show you." The central arbiter raised its appendages in what might have been surrender or defense. "Stop. You don't understand the consequences of this knowledge." "No," Sarah replied, her eyes now glowing with the same ethereal light that surrounded her. "You don't understand. Humans have always known, somewhere deep in our collective consciousness, that death isn't the end. We've built religions around it, written stories about it, but we never had the science to prove it until now." Security forces poured into the chamber, their weapons trained on her. Sarah observed them with a detached curiosity, aware that she should be afraid but finding fear impossible. Her consciousness had expanded beyond such primitive responses. "Your weapons can't harm me," she stated simply. "Not anymore. My consciousness has learned to maintain quantum coherence even through physical destruction. You've helped me prove my theory. And in doing so, you've changed everything." The arbiters conferred rapidly, their crystalline structures flashing in patterns of increasing complexity. Finally, the central figure addressed her again. "You must be contained. The implications of this ability are revolutionary," Sarah finished. "And that's exactly what terrifies you, isn't it? The Nexus Collective has maintained its power by controlling the flow of scientific knowledge. But you can't control this. You can't control me." She raised her hand, and the quantum patterns around her intensified. The security forces' weapons dissolved into their component atoms, spreading through the air like metallic dust. "I'm leaving now," Sarah announced, and I'm taking my research with me. But first, she turned to the other holding cells visible through the chamber's translucent walls, where other scientists and researchers from various species were being held. With a gesture, their containment fields failed. "Everyone deserves to be free to pursue knowledge," she declared. "That's what makes us human. Our insatiable curiosity, our drive to understand, our refusal to accept limitations." As alarms continued to blare and chaos spread through the facility, Sarah Chen walked calmly toward the exit. The arbiters made no move to stop her. They had sought to understand human consciousness and had instead unleashed something beyond their comprehension. Sarah paused at the threshold, looking back at her former captors. "You wanted to know the secret of consciousness. Here it is. It can't be contained. It can't be controlled. It can only be set free." With those words, she stepped through the doorway, leaving the Nexus Collective to face a future where their monopoly on knowledge was about to crumble. The revolution had begun, not with weapons or armies, but with a single human's refusal to stay dead. News of Dr. Sarah Chen's resurrection spread through the Nexus Collective's vast network like a virus, impossible to contain or deny. In the 3 cycles since her escape, the Collective's carefully maintained order had begun to crack. Sarah watched it all unfold from the sanctuary of the abandoned research outpost on Proxima VI, a facility so old the Collective had forgotten its existence. The quantum patterns flowing across her skin had become a constant companion, shifting and changing with her thoughts. She stood before a holographic display, watching as reports filtered in from across the galaxy. Other humans held in collective facilities were showing signs of similar abilities, though none had yet achieved her level of control. "They're afraid," said Kex, a former collective researcher who had chosen to defect after witnessing Sarah's transformation. The aliens' translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed their anxiety. "The Arbiters have called an emergency conclave for the first time in 10,000 years." Sarah nodded, manipulating the quantum fields around her to interact directly with the facility's ancient systems. They should be afraid. They built their power on the assumption that knowledge could be controlled, contained, rationed out to maintain their authority. What happens to that power when death itself becomes negotiable? The facility's sensors chimed, alerting them to an incoming transmission. Sarah recognized the quantum signature immediately. It was from another human research facility, one she had helped liberate 2 cycles ago. The holographic display shifted, showing the face of Dr. Marcus Wong, another scientist who had begun manifesting abilities similar to hers. "Sarah, we've made a breakthrough," Marcus said, his own skin showing faint traces of quantum patterns. "The changes aren't just physical. The quantum entanglement is spreading through human populations that have never even encountered the Collective. It's like humanity as a whole is waking up." Sarah felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. How widespread? Reports are coming in from Earth colonies across 3 sectors. People are experiencing spontaneous quantum coherence, enhanced cognitive abilities, even limited consciousness transfer. The Collective's attempts to suppress the information are failing. Kex moved closer to the display, their crystalline appendages trembling. "This is why the Arbiters were so desperate to understand your research. They must have sensed this was coming. They knew humanity was on the verge of something revolutionary," Sarah agreed. "But they didn't understand what. Even I didn't fully grasp it until they killed me." She paused, watching the quantum patterns dance across her reflection in the facility's metallic walls. "We're not just breaking the barriers between life and death. We're evolving beyond them." The display suddenly flickered with emergency broadcasts from across collective space. Reports of containment failures, of human prisoners manifesting abilities, of entire facilities going dark. The Arbiters' worst fears were being realized. Their monopoly on advanced knowledge was crumbling. "They're mobilizing their enforcement fleets," Kex reported, interfacing with the facility's long-range sensors. "Every human settlement in collective space is being targeted." Sarah's expression hardened. "They still think this is something they can stop with force." She reached out, her consciousness extending through the quantum fields that now seem to permeate all of space. They don't understand that it's already too late. Through her expanded awareness, she could sense others like her, humans across the galaxy awakening to their new potential. Each death at the hands of the collective only accelerated the process, as if humanity's collective consciousness was learning, adapting, evolving in response to the threat. Marcus, she addressed the hologram. How many of the liberated facilities are operational? 7, including yours. We've managed to decrypt much of the collective's research data. They've been studying humanity for centuries, documenting anomalies they couldn't explain. Instances of near-death experiences, consciousness transfer, quantum coherence in human brain activity. They knew we were different, but they couldn't understand why. Sarah began accessing the facility's deeper systems, activating technologies that had lain dormant for millennia, because they approached it from the wrong direction. They tried to study consciousness as if it were just another force to be measured and controlled. They never considered that consciousness might be the fundamental force that shapes reality itself. The facility hummed to life around them, ancient machines responding to Sarah's quantum-enhanced commands. Kex watched in amazement as systems they had thought dead or useless began to power up, their true purposes finally revealed. "What are you doing?" they asked, both fascinated and terrified. "The collective built their power on hoarding knowledge," Sarah replied, her body now glowing intensely with quantum energy. "We're going to set it free. All of it. Every piece of suppressed research, every hidden discovery, every breakthrough they've kept locked away. And we're going to broadcast it across every frequency, every network, every quantum channel they can't shut down." Marcus's hologram smiled. "The other facilities are ready. We've been preparing for this. The arbiters will try to stop us," Kex warned. "They'll bring their full might against you." Sarah turned to face them, her eyes blazing with quantum fire. "Let them come. Every attempt they make to suppress this will only make humanity stronger. We're not just fighting for our survival now. We're fighting for the right of every species to grow, to learn, to evolve." She reached out, connecting with the other facilities through the quantum network that now linked awakened humans across the galaxy. In that moment, she could feel the full weight of what they were about to unleash. Not just information, but a fundamental change in how sentient beings would interact with the universe itself. "Humanity's greatest strength," she said softly, "has always been our ability to face the unknown and emerge transformed. The collective tried to kill me, to contain what I discovered. Instead, they helped birth something beyond their comprehension." The facility's transmission arrays powered up, ready to broadcast their message to the galaxy. Sarah Chen, once a prisoner of the collective, now stood at the forefront of a revolution that would reshape the very nature of existence itself. The price of knowledge had always been high, but for humanity, it had never been too high to pay. The collective's enforcement fleet darkened the skies above Proxima VI, their biomechanical ships forming a web of destruction around the ancient research facility. Inside, Sarah Chen watched their approach through the quantum field that now extended her consciousness far beyond her physical form. Each ship carried hundreds of minds, bent on containing what humanity had become, yet none of them truly understood what they faced. "Their weapons are primed," Kex reported, their crystalline appendages interfacing with the facility's defensive systems. "They're using quantum dampening technology. They think they can suppress the field." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "They still don't understand. You can't dampen consciousness itself." She reached out through the quantum network, connecting with the other awakened humans across the galaxy. Their collective consciousness had become a symphony of thought and purpose, each mind adding its own unique resonance to the whole. Marcus's voice came through the facility's comm system, his quantum signature stronger than ever. "The broadcast is ready. Every facility is synchronized. Once we begin, they won't be able to stop the information from spreading." "The arbiters have issued their final warning," Kex announced, their voice trembling. "They're threatening to sterilize the entire sector." Sarah turned to the holographic display showing the fleet above. The collected ships were marvels of engineering, designed to enforce order across the galaxy. But they were built to fight conventional threats, not the awakening of consciousness itself. They made a fundamental mistake, she said, watching as quantum patterns danced across her skin in increasingly complex formations. They thought consciousness was a product of physical reality, something that could be contained or destroyed. But it's the other way around. Consciousness shapes reality. We're not just accessing quantum fields, we're becoming them. The first shots from the fleet lit up the atmosphere, quantum dampening beams designed to suppress any unusual energy signatures. They passed through Sarah's quantum field like light through glass, leaving her untouched. Now, she commanded. Across the galaxy, 7 facilities activated simultaneously. The broadcast began, not just through conventional channels, but through the quantum network itself. Every piece of suppressed knowledge, every hidden discovery, every breakthrough the collective had hoarded began flowing into the consciousness of every sentient being within range. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The fleet's coordinated attack faltered as crew members received the information, their own consciousness expanding in response to the revelation of truths long denied. Sarah could feel their confusion, their wonder, their fear through the quantum field. "They're trying to lock down their ship systems," Kex reported, watching the chaos unfold. "But the information, it's not just data, it's changing them." Sarah nodded. Knowledge changes everything it touches. That's why the collective feared it so much. She extended her consciousness further, touching the minds of the fleet's crew. They're beginning to understand. Some of them are already showing signs of quantum coherence. Through the facility's sensors, they watched as patterns of light began appearing on some of the ships, their crews experiencing the first stages of the awakening that humanity had undergone. The collective's worst fear was being realized. Their own people were transforming. "Sarah," Marcus's voice carried urgency, "we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations. The awakening, it's spreading faster than we anticipated. Not just to humans anymore, but to every species capable of conscious thought." The quantum field around Sarah pulsed with new energy as she processed this information. "Of course," she whispered, "consciousness isn't bound by species. Once awakened, it recognizes itself in all forms." The fleet above began to break formation, some ships turning away while others maintained their attack posture. Through the quantum network, Sarah could sense the conflict within each vessel, those who embraced the awakening versus those who fought desperately to maintain control. Kex moved to her side, their own crystalline structure beginning to show traces of quantum patterns. "What's happening to me?" they asked, both fearful and fascinated. "You're awakening," Sarah replied gently. "Your consciousness is recognizing its true nature." The collective suppressed this knowledge in all species, not just humans. We were just the first to break free. The facility shuddered as several ships opened fire, their weapons aimed at the transmission arrays. But it was too late. The quantum network had become self-sustaining, consciousness itself carrying the information across the galaxy. "They can destroy every facility," Sarah announced to her colleagues across the network. "They can burn every planet. It won't matter now. Consciousness has remembered what it truly is." Through her expanded awareness, she could feel it happening everywhere. The Great Awakening spreading like ripples through the cosmic ocean of consciousness. Species that had been enemies for millennia suddenly recognized themselves in each other. Barriers of culture and biology dissolved in the face of a deeper truth. The collective's fleet hung motionless in space, their crews caught between old loyalties and new understanding. Sarah reached out to them, not with weapons or threats, but with an invitation. "You don't have to fight us," she broadcast, her consciousness touching each mind in the fleet. "You don't have to fear this. What's happening isn't an ending. It's an evolution. The knowledge you tried to suppress wasn't just about cheating death or gaining power. It was about remembering what we all are, consciousness itself, playing at being separate. Above them, The first ships began powering down their weapons. Others followed, the quantum patterns of awakening spreading through their crews like wildfire. The revolution they had started was transforming into something far more profound. Not a war between species or ideologies, but the collective awakening of consciousness to its own infinite nature. Sarah Chen, once a prisoner marked for death, now stood at the center of a transformation that would reshape the galaxy. But as she watched the quantum patterns of awakening spread across space and time, she realized that even this was just the beginning. The heart of the collective's power lay within the Nexus, a massive structure that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions humanity had only theorized about until now. As Sarah Chen's consciousness expanded through the quantum network, she finally understood why the Arbiters had chosen this place for their seat of power. It was a focal point where reality itself grew thin. They're gathering their remaining forces, Marcus reported through the network. His consciousness had evolved to the point where traditional communication was nearly obsolete, but they maintained it for the benefit of those still transitioning. Every ship loyal to the old order is converging on the Nexus. Sarah stood in the command center of what had once been the collective's prison facility, now transformed into a beacon of awakening. The quantum patterns flowing through her had become so intense that her physical form seemed almost translucent, more energy than matter. "How many ships have joined us?" she asked Kex, who had fully embraced their own awakening, their crystalline structure now pulsing with quantum fire. "Nearly 60% of the fleet has awakened," they responded, their consciousness resonating through the quantum field. "But the ones who remain loyal, they're different. The Arbiters have done something to them." Through the expanded awareness that all awakened beings now shared, Sarah could sense it too. The Arbiters had weaponized consciousness itself, forcing their remaining followers into a twisted version of quantum coherence, where the natural awakening brought expansion and understanding. This artificial version created perfect, unquestioning obedience. "They've corrupted their own people," Sarah whispered, feeling the pain and distortion in the minds of the collective's remaining forces. "Turned them into extensions of their will." The quantum network hummed with activity as more beings across the galaxy awakened to their true nature. But with each new consciousness that joined them, the Arbiters' resistance grew more desperate and dangerous. "They're preparing something at the Nexus," Marcus warned. "The quantum readings are off the scale. It's like they're trying to tear a hole in reality itself." Sarah extended her awareness toward the Nexus, probing the massive structure with her quantum-enhanced consciousness. What she found there sent shockwaves through the network. The Arbiters were attempting to sever this region of space from the rest of the universe, creating a bubble of reality where they could maintain their control. "They would rather destroy everything than lose their power," Kex observed, their voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "If they succeed, billions will be trapped in their artificial reality." Sarah's consciousness reached out to all the awakened beings across the galaxy, their collective awareness forming a tapestry of thought and purpose. "We can't let them succeed," she declared, "not just for ourselves, but for every consciousness that might ever awaken." Through the quantum network, she could feel the agreement of countless minds, human and alien alike. They had moved beyond the limitations of species and form, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. "The Arbiters think they understand consciousness because they've learned to manipulate it," Sarah continued, her physical form now barely visible through the intense quantum energy surrounding her. "But they're still trapped in the old paradigm of control and dominance. They don't understand that true consciousness can't be contained or directed. It can only be allowed to flow freely." The facility's sensors registered a massive surge of energy from the Nexus. The Arbiters had begun their attempt to rewrite the laws of reality in their domain. Space itself seemed to bend and warp around the massive structure. "Sarah," Marcus's voice carried urgency even through the quantum field, "if we're going to stop them, it has to be now. Once they complete the separation, we won't be able to reach them." She nodded, her consciousness already reaching out to coordinate their response. Every awakened being in range of the Nexus would need to act in perfect harmony, not through forced coherence like the Arbiters used, but through the natural resonance of freely chosen unity. Everyone. She broadcast through the network. What we're about to attempt has never been done before. We're not just fighting for control of space or resources. We're fighting for the very nature of consciousness itself. The quantum field around her intensified as awakened beings across the galaxy added their consciousness to the effort. Humans who had never met joined minds with aliens they once feared, all united in the understanding that they were expressions of the same underlying awareness. The arbiters believe consciousness is a tool to be used, Sarah continued, feeling the power of countless awakened minds flowing through her. We know it's the foundation of everything. They try to control reality by controlling consciousness. We'll show them that consciousness itself is reality. The first shots were fired as the collective's corrupted fleet engaged their awakened former comrades. But this battle would not be won with conventional weapons. As the arbiters attempted to tear reality apart, the awakened consciousness of billions reached out to hold it together. Sarah Chen, once a scientist who had merely theorized about quantum consciousness, now stood at the center of its ultimate expression. The power flowing through her was beyond anything she had imagined in her previous life, not because it was foreign or external, but because it was the pure expression of what consciousness had always been. As space itself began to buckle under the opposing forces of the arbiters' attempt to divide reality and the awakened being's effort to preserve it, Sarah realized that they had reached the true breaking point, not of space or time or reality, but of humanity's long journey from unconscious evolution to conscious participation in the universe itself. The final confrontation had begun, and its outcome would determine not just the fate of humanity or the galaxy, but the very nature of consciousness and reality for all that would follow. Reality trembled at the edge of breaking. The Nexus, once a symbol of the collective's absolute power, had become the epicenter of a battle that transcended physical warfare. Sarah Chen's consciousness extended through the quantum network, feeling the strain as the arbiters attempted to tear their section of space away from the rest of the universe. The corrupted fleet surrounding the Nexus fired continuous barrages of quantum-disrupting weapons, trying to break the connection between the awakened beings. But their attacks passed through the quantum field like stones through water, creating ripples but unable to disturb the deeper unity beneath. "They're almost through," Marcus warned, his consciousness pulsing with urgency through the network. "The fabric of space-time is starting to separate." Sarah could feel it, a wrongness in the fundamental structure of reality as the arbiters forced their will upon it. Through the quantum field, she sensed the agony of every corrupted mind under their control, forced to participate in this violation of natural law. "This ends now," she declared, her physical form almost completely transformed into pure quantum energy, not through force or dominance, but through understanding. With that, she did something unprecedented. She opened her consciousness completely, sharing every memory, every thought, every moment of her existence with everyone connected to the network. The awakened beings followed her lead, their collective consciousness becoming a vast ocean of shared experience. The effect rippled through space itself. The corrupted minds in the collective's fleet began to falter as echoes of their true selves reached them through the quantum field. The arbiters' control began to slip as their followers remembered who and what they really were. "Impossible," the thought voice of the lead arbiter thundered through the quantum field. "Consciousness must be controlled. Without our guidance, chaos will consume everything." Sarah directed her awareness toward the Nexus, toward the beings who had appointed themselves the guardians of knowledge and evolution. "You never understood," she projected, her consciousness carrying not judgment but compassion. "Control was never the answer. Evolution isn't about domination. It's about integration." Through the quantum network, every awakened being could sense the truth of her words. The universe wasn't a hierarchy to be controlled, but a dance of consciousness expressing itself in infinite forms. The arbiter's fundamental mistake had been trying to force that dance into rigid patterns. The Nexus pulsed with impossible energies as the arbiters made their final attempt to separate their realm from the rest of space. But as they did, something unexpected happened. The corrupted minds they controlled, touched by the shared consciousness of the awakened beings, began to remember themselves. One by one, then in waves, the collective's fleet stopped firing. The quantum patterns of natural awakening spread through their crews, breaking the artificial coherence the arbiters had forced upon them. The nexus itself began to resonate with the frequency of freely chosen unity. No, the arbiter's collective voice shook reality itself. We will not allow this chaos. It's not chaos, Sarah responded, her consciousness now extended throughout the quantum field. It's growth, evolution, the very thing you claim to protect. Through the network, she could feel every awakened being focusing their consciousness on the nexus. Not attacking, not forcing, but simply sharing their understanding. The rigid structures of control that the arbiters had built began to dissolve in the face of something far more powerful, the natural tendency of consciousness to recognize itself in all things. The nexus, that vast structure of impossible geometry, began to transform. Its dimensions shifted as the consciousness within it awakened to its true nature. The arbiters, those ancient beings who had held themselves apart for so long, finally faced a force they couldn't control or contain, the inevitable evolution of consciousness itself. Let go, Sarah urged them, her awareness touching their ancient minds. You don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to control. Just experience. Just be. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the universe held its breath. Then, like ice melting in spring sunlight, the arbiters' resistance began to fade. The artificial boundaries they had tried to create dissolved as their consciousness, so long imprisoned in patterns of control, remembered its original nature. The quantum field surged with new energy as the arbiters' awakening sent ripples through reality. Their vast knowledge, no longer contained and controlled, flowed freely through the network. But it was different now, not a tool for domination, but a shared heritage of all conscious beings. Sarah Chen, whose death and rebirth had catalyzed this transformation, felt the change rippling through every level of existence. The barriers between species, between forms of consciousness, between different expressions of reality itself, had not been destroyed but transcended. The nexus, once the seat of the collective's power, became something new, a focal point for the awakened consciousness that now spread throughout the galaxy. Not a center of control, but a nexus in truth, a meeting place for all forms of consciousness to share, learn, and grow. What happens now? Kex asked, their crystalline form shimmering with quantum energy. Sarah looked out at the transformed space around them, feeling the pulse of billions of awakened minds sharing in the wonder of existence. Now, she said, we truly begin to explore, not as separate beings fighting for control, but as expressions of consciousness discovering itself in endless new ways. The quantum network hummed with possibility as awakened beings across the galaxy began to explore their new reality. The age of separation and control was over. What followed would not be chaos, as the arbiters had feared, but a new kind of order, one that arose naturally from the free interaction of conscious beings. Humanity's defiance of death had led not to destruction, but to transformation. In facing their own extinction, they had discovered something far greater than mere survival. They had remembered what consciousness had always been, not a force to be controlled, but the very essence of reality itself, forever exploring, forever evolving, forever free.